I'm Thranky Ramacharaka. There's a lot of talk about evil. There's been a lot of talk about evil for a very long time. There's a lot of thought about evil. There's a lot of feelings about evil. That's number one that I want to talk about here briefly. Number two, in order to talk about it, I'm going to refer to somebody, some written correspondence that took place between or among a few disciples. Maybe it's just one here. I can't really tell at the moment. And Swami Lahiri Mahasaya, middle 1800s, India. Now, I don't want to engage in or get into a disputation or endless literary controversy over Lahiri Mahasaya. You know, there's a lot of doubt these days, and rightfully so, over anybody who comes along and, you know, who somebody else calls a guru or this or that, whatever. Right? If you don't know who Lahiri Mahasaya was, then look it up. I don't want to, describe it all and come to the defense of that personage here. It's not my point. And I don't want anybody throwing up, doubts here or arguments against anything like that. I just want to refer to a couple things that he wrote in this correspondence with at least one disciple. And this has to do with evil. All right? Now, before I do this, I want to point out something. I had a client, a student, and whatever, a 2T, whatever. And I don't have a title for myself. But this person was very concerned about evil in the world. And he went into, he was getting into EMT training, emergency medical technician training. And he was seeing a lot of abhorrent things, the results of, bad accidents on the highway, sickness, illness, death, and possibly, probably, victims of violent crimes. And he was, like I said, he was already a person who was very concerned about evil in the world. And he wanted to know if I could help him prepare for being able to gracefully and without negative emotional effects, and any level of psychological effects on him, so that he could do his job well when facing these things and seeing the evil and its results up close when it comes to victims of violent crimes. So I at one point I gave him some methods and techniques, and he kind of faded away from me and the whole project that I was working on with him. The day that I mentioned to him that perhaps he can consider or should consider a point of view about things, about these things, evil, a point of view that rises above such perceptions, such that from this new point of view or this new level of understanding and seeing things, comprehending things, observing things, a level at which evil does not exist. More of an expanded consciousness point of view, or more of an omniscient point of view. Like, try to find that level or point of view within himself in which evil does not exist, at which evil does not exist. And he refuted that. He said, no, evil is real. And I couldn't get him to listen to my point. I couldn't get him to. All right. So I know how sticky and this idea of evil is, and I'm not going to refute that there is such a thing as evil. I think it's a matter of point of view about affairs, or better yet, a level of discourse about affairs, which is a level of discourse arising from a level of understanding. All right, so now I want to turn, with respect to this, I want to turn to just a few simple little back and forth from a disciple to Lahiri Mayasaya. Let me get my glasses on here and read these. These were translated within the last 30 years from the original Bengali. All right. The disciple writes, "What should I write? I don't know what is possibly unknown to you. Absorbed in ego, I'm sitting here dressed up as boss. But I don't realize that this boss's key to the lock is in your possession. Even though you are with me at all times, I don't see it even after seeing it. This is a mystery that has revealed itself to me recently. You know everything. Though I have eyes, I'm blind. It's all my misdeed." Mahasaya's reply. This continues. Now, the disciple's letter. "Two people have been wonderfully comforted. The patient has been disappointed by eminent doctors, and then by your grace has become completely cured. No one survives this disease. The doctors said as much." Lahiri Mahasaya's reply. 5 words. All that happens is good. In another letter, in this chain of correspondence, immediately following that reply, all that happens is good, followed by a letter from Lahiri Mahasaya, a letter stating this: "Do not grieve over untimely death. One believes that there are timely and untimely events, but there is nothing untimely for time. For this reason, a life's duty is to remember at all times the soul manifested in time. Because of this, I tell everyone to be careful and verbally advise them to always be aware of time. And sadly, many do not heed such advice." In a following letter, Lahiri Mahasaya. "In this body of mine, I've suffered so many of his diseases." This would be somebody else that he was around. "When there is no oil in the lamp, he attains nirvana. If nature is unwilling, how long can life remain in the body? There is no death for the Atman, because the Atman itself is the eternal. The always present one is beyond time even. The eternal is like a motionless ocean, and it is the nature of the river of life to merge into that ocean. If one is vigilantly aware of time, there is no death. Freedom is in striving for the bodiless. A shortly following letter. If there is no strength in the mind, then one should stay in the place where the mind receives strength and practice, it says Kriya here, from that place. For our purposes, I'm just going to carry that over into the material here on my channel. It certainly is not Kriya Yoga. I wouldn't pretend to teach such a thing. But I would say any reliable work toward true selfhood, self-mastery, personal involvement, away from consciousness hijacking and perception deception. If there's no strength in the mind, then one should stay in a place where the mind receives strength and practice from there." A following letter. Doing Kriya out of fear, and here I will generalize this. I don't have the authority to do so, but I think it's relevant here for us. And this is how. Right? Doing our work, let's say, out of fear, let's say, fear of the way the world is, fear of the agents of consciousness hijacking and perception deception that I point out a lot here. Doing this work out of fear of those. It's not my point in bringing up those things. To create fear, no. It's to give reason and to increase awareness of the obstacles that are in place all around us. That's very important. But fear, doing any of this out of fear is not doing the work. And one will not be rescued by that work then. One last thing. Where is it? Yeah. And regarding fear, well, when in desperation, all right themselves and call upon God, or whatever. Right? Even the rebellious look to take shelter in God in times of desperation. So with respect to that, just do your own work and proceed. And there was one last thing here. In this world, one has to, this is another letter from Messiah. In this world, one has to face many tests. The world is the testing ground. This means that one needs to be skillful and attentive to all sides and not be lacking in any area. Right now, one needs to do that which does not diminish inner strength. With inordinate skill and effort will one have to perform all works in the field of duty. One must not be fearful of anything. Satan is surrounding all areas of the mind. Be vigilant upon the soul and nothing else. Keep careful watch of this. The way that I have instructed you to practice in previous letters, do it accordingly. There is nothing more to write about this. Okay. That's what I wanted to share with you from this correspondence. And about the notion of evil. You see, when we talk about evil, people tend to go one of two ways. They rarely stay indifferent about it. They either become fearful of it, and it overwhelms them, the thought of it, or they become attracted to it. They either vehemently repel it, or they vehemently draw themselves toward it and then toward themselves. It is possible to transcend that way of thinking, that dual way of thinking about it. It is possible, and it is recommended. Now, yes, at a certain level of discourse, we need to be aware of the things that would work against us. We may come to think also that, things are happening too fast. Things are happening too fast. This is all coming on too fast. We're sinking. We're this, we're that. The evil is prevalent. Come on, this is fear talk. This is placing an assessment on things, our own assessment, often very religiously based. It's fear. Even if we say, well, no, I'm not afraid. It's just that there's all this evil. This assigning or ascribing the idea of evil with all of its connotations, all of the baggage that comes with that idea, that word, comes a lot of distraction. It's a whole mind clutter thing. Just do the work and proceed. The things that will get in our way, or that are there to get in our way, we may call them evil, because we may say, hey, they are working against my evolvement, against evolvement in general. They devolve affairs. They push things the other way. Well, there are always going to be such. There's always. The law of opposites is always at work. It's in everything. It's part of what makes things happen. If we can get rid of the idea of evil, really, and just consider, if we can rise ourselves to the point where we can see the sense, feel the sense, experience the sense, understand the sense, realize the sense in what Lahiri Mahasaya was saying when all that happens is good, when he said all that happens is good. And there is nothing that happens untimely. All that happens is good. Don't just, in other words, don't assume that it's rubbish, that it's gibberish. Assume that he might have known what he's talking about. And if you can't find a sense in it at first, assume that there is sense in it and that you just haven't found it yet. If you think you're wiser about such affairs than Lahiri Mahasaya, regardless of how you feel about Lahiri Mahasaya, regardless of whether you even know who he was or is, whatever, I'm going to propose to you that you don't know more about it than him. So assume that he made sense. Assume that there is sense in that, and you find it. I'm not going to say much more about it because it is a difficult thing to grasp at first. That yes, there are things that would work against our evolvement. Yes. Just like he said, Satan, whatever, is, stuck all around every part of our minds. That's true. He said that too. So then how is all that happens good? If this is nonsense to you, then you just haven't made sense out of it yet. Assume that there is sense. It does make sense. You find it. I'm not going to add to what he said. I could talk about such a thing elsewhere, but I'm not going to do it here where I'm reading his letters. I'm not going to try to explain him. You find it. You make sense out of it for yourself. That's where it needs to happen anyway, no matter what I would say. I'm Tharaki Ramacharaka. Be well.